a grim thought experiment from the 41st millennium. Today we face a terrible question about power and consent. We will explore what happens when the One Ring appears on Terra and touches the Emperor's will. We will follow the consequences as the Primarchs confront a choice that could end the Imperium or remake it. The story shows promises that sound like mercy and how they mask control. It reveals how a single circle of gold could turn the Astronomican into a cage, and how a Sister of Silence can become the knife that cuts a god. You will witness a son say no to his father, and a price paid to keep freedom alive, even if it hurts. This video covers the full arc from arrival to domination, to a final cut that saves humanity at a cost. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. I served in the shadow of the Golden Throne. My voice was silence. My duty was negation. I was a Sister of Silence, sworn to be a null against the sea of souls. I knew the stench of the warp by its absence around me. I knew the weight of the throne by the way it pressed on bone and thought. I knew the Emperor as a wound that never closed, burning day and night. On the day the ring appeared, the air went thin. Candles guttered, though there was no wind. The priests chanted, but syllables slid off the tongue and fell like ash. A courier from the vaults ran with bare feet and bleeding hands. He carried a small black casket sealed with 12 sigils. He knelt before the Captain General. He tried to speak the catechism. Nothing came out. He opened the casket with trembling fingers. Inside lay a circle of gold. It was plain and bright. It seemed small until you looked at it for longer than a blink. Then it grew. Not in size, but in reach. The air leaned toward it. The hall leaned toward it. I felt nothing from it at first, because my curse is emptiness. Then I felt something that was not the warp press against my emptiness and find purchase, like a hook in scar tissue, like iron in a healed bone. The Captain General of the Adeptus Custodes gave a single order. Close the hall. No vox, no chant, no data, no prayer, all attention to the ring. The priests wailed and tried to light more candles. Sparks died out in midair. The tech priests reached for auspex and cogitators. Their screens held a single rune. Dominion. I stepped closer, because that was my role. I was the knife of nullity. I watched the gold. It watched me back. That made no sense. The warp looks back with 1,000 eyes. This thing looks back with one will. The Astronomican flickered. We felt it in our teeth. The sound was not sound. It was the shape of silence changing shape. Across Terra, astropaths screamed. The vault walls trembled. The throne shifted, as if the corpse upon it drew a slow breath. The ring grew heavy in the casket. The courier's hands broke bones he did not know he had. He did not drop it. We carried the casket down, past silent banners, past statues with blind eyes, past doors made of sins and histories. At each portal, a different authority tried to claim it. The Inquisition, the Custodes, the Mechanicus. Each offered law. Each offered threat. The Captain General said 5 words. By his will it moves. None dared stand twice. At the foot of the throne, we stopped. Heat rolled like a storm. The Emperor's attendants worked with bleeding fingers and dry eyes. They burned with duty. They crumbled with age. Every line of gold wiring hummed with names of lost sons. Every tube that fed the throne sang the syllable of pain. I can live beside that song. I was made to endure it. Yet that day I felt something else. A chord under the song. Deep, flat, certain. It promised an end. The ring wanted a finger. That much any fool could tell. The question was whose? The priests argued that the Emperor's hand was already holy and machine. The tech priests argued that no Xeno artifact, no heretic thing, no unknown relic should touch the divine mechanism. The Inquisitors argued that destruction must be tested, though destruction might fail. The Astartes champions argued with their eyes and hands on their hilts. No one raised a voice. The throne forbids noise. Even the arguments felt thin. I felt the ring's gaze. It was not affection. It was not hate. It was selection. I knew it would not choose a priest. It would not choose a machine. It would not choose a child of the gene forgers. It wanted the hand that already ruled. It wanted the will that already bound a species. The Captain General lifted the casket. He did not bow at the foot of the golden throne. He set the casket upon the adamant plate that bore the weight of 10,000 years. He turned and faced the gathered multitudes. He called for quiet. There was only the quiet we already had. He said what none of us wanted to say. If this can end his pain, it must be tried. If it can end the tithe of souls, it must be tried. If it can break the chains without breaking the species, it must be tried. I smelled cooked copper and old blood. I watched the Emperor's withered hand lift. The tendons crawled like ropes in a storm. The nails were black and gold. The skin was parchment and lightning. He reached without haste. He reached as if this moment had been written long ago, and he was merely aligning the script. He did not feel the warp recoil. I felt the warp pause. That was worse. The ring rose from the casket as his hand neared it. It wanted upward. It sought the finger that had built an empire. It found it. Gold kissed gold. The ring shrank. It fit. The Astronomican flared. The light that guides the Imperium became a wound in the night. Ships 1,000 light years away felt a hand move across their hulls. Navigators bled from their third eyes. The choir pits filled with froth and teeth. On Cadia's grave the dust stirred. In the eye of Terra, a new note sounded. It was not laughter. It was not rage. It was recognition. I felt something else. For the first time in my life, I felt a will that made the warp feel small. It spoke without words. Not to me, to the galaxy. It said a promise. One species, one mind, one peace. It sounded clean. It sounded final. It sounded like the last lock on a door no one should shut. The Emperor's eyes opened a fraction. Light ran in clean lines as if geometry could bleed. He did not smile. He did not move his lips. His voice moved in the stone. The tithe ends. The throne is enough. The throne will be enough because I am enough. The priests fell and touched their foreheads to the floor. The tech priests froze like machines without orders. The Captain General went to one knee and kept his blade upright. I stayed standing. My emptiness met the new shape of his will, and it sparked. It felt like a cold sun against a dead sea. I took a step back. Only one. News crossed Terra in minutes. The tithe stopped. The black ships turned away. The cages stayed locked. The astropaths did not feed the throne. The throne burned anyway. It burned brighter. It burned clean. Relief flooded hives and shipyards. People wept. People sang. For a day, the Imperium felt like a promise kept. Then the whispers began. They came first to those who serve closest to him. The daughters of the throne. The silent. The faithful. The engineered. We heard nothing with ears. We felt a draw. Not a scream, a tug, a patient thirst. It was like standing on a shoreline and feeling the tide reach for you with fingers. You think you can step back. You cannot step back forever. The water remembers. It returns. One of the attendants collapsed beside the base of the throne. Her eyes were dry. Her face was calm. Her soul left without noise. It flowed like a bright thread and vanished into the gold wiring. Another fell. Then another. The machines did not drink them. The throne did not drink them. The thing that wore the ring did. He did not reach with hands. He did not turn his head. He drew them the way a star draws comets. Quiet. I wanted to look away. I did not. I watched the shape in the light drink the souls of his own servants. I hated the question that rose in me. Was this mercy? Was this a cleaner tithe? Was this the end or the beginning? Beyond Terra, strange reports came fast. Entire scolly of sanctioned psychers woke smiling and then died, one by one, in perfect order. Their souls moved along hidden paths and joined a larger flow. The murder cults of secret inquisitors saw their altars go dim. The cultists vanished like mist in sunlight. The ring did not love cruelty. It loved order. It hated waste. It hated noise. It turned shrieking into silence. The chaos gods did not rage first. They waited. They tasted the new law. They tapped the bars of a new cage. Khorne tested the rules against murder and found them narrowed. Nurgle tested the rules against despair and found them redirected. Slanesh tested the rules against excess and found them pinned in place like insects. Tzeentch tested the rules against change and felt his feathers singe. Then the rage came. The first war pulse hit Catachan jungles at noon. The second hit the moons of Ultramar. The third broke a Craftworld's glass gardens. The fourth tried to wash over Terra. It stopped at the palace walls. The ring had made a boundary. It did not like loose frontiers. Aeldari farseers shivered and spoke of a second eye that was not an eye. They named it in a tongue that hates endings. They said the human god had found a ring with an older god inside it. They said the old tyrant had found a new chain. They said the new chain would strangle everything. Roboute Guilliman came in person. He walked through halls he rebuilt with blood and treaty. His face held the burden of fathers. He smelled the clean burning of the throne and did not smile. He bowed to the Captain General. He asked what price had been paid. The answer was simple. The black ships stood full and idle. The price was everywhere else. Belisarius Cawl arrived with a caravan of voices. Some of his mouths sang praise to order. Some whispered about dominion within dominion. He presented instruments wrapped in the skins of dead codes. He asked to measure the new law. The Captain General allowed it on a short leash. Cawl nodded, as if he had already expected the leash and installed it himself. Inquisitors crowded like crows around a gallows. Ordo Hereticus, Ordo Maleus, Ordo Xenos. They outnumbered their own shadows. Each one wrote a death warrant for the thing that breathed upon the throne. Each one burned that same warrant when the Astronomican flared and their ships arrived in time for once. I wrote nothing. I stood and watched and counted the attendants who did not rise. The deaths continued. Slow, clean, ordered. The Emperor spoke again on the second day. The tithe is efficient now. There is no pain. There is no waste. There is unity. The ring did not speak with him. It spoke through him. Or perhaps it engraved his will in a new script. Far away, Abaddon stood in the vengeful spirit's corpse halls and turned his head like a hound. He felt a leash in the night that was not his. He ground his teeth. He shouted to gods that do not listen when they do not want to. He promised a 13th war, a 14th war, a war without number, against a silence that dared to command. Eldrad watched threads knot and cut. He saw one future where humanity slept inside a single mind. He saw one where the ring cracked like ice, and the shards became crowns. He saw one where his people tried to steal the ring and became prisoners of a new song. He smiled without humor. He sent a whisper to Ulthwe, "Do not touch it yet." On the third day, the first metamorphosis came. The gold filigree that wraps the corpse upon the throne shifted pattern. Not a change made by hand, a change made by idea. The symbols simplified. The skulls turned from scowls into masks. The wings folded into rings. The cables hummed in chords that counted to one. Every local machine spirit settled down like an animal before a storm that promises precise rain. I felt the draw again. It touched my emptiness and slid. It could not drink me the way it drank the others. I was a blank. It did not understand me. It tried again. It learned. The third touch brushed the edge of my humanity rather than my null. I felt tired. I felt old. I wanted to lie down. I wanted to be part of something clean. I clenched my jaw. My teeth ached. Have you ever wondered which corruption would claim a god emperor first? A ring of domination, the warp itself, or the quiet need to end pain at any cost? Tell me in the comments. I want to know which fate you see at work. Guilliman asked to stand at the foot of the throne and speak as a son to a father. The Captain General allowed it. The Primarch looked up through the gold light. His voice was steady. "Father, you are consuming your people. Father, you are becoming a different law than the one we have kept. Father, what is your will?" The answer came like a decree. "I will unite mankind in truth. I will remove the need for fear. I will guide every mind in harmony. I will end the predation of gods. I will burn the warp clean by removing its food. I will do it with their consent. I will shape their consent." Guilliman closed his eyes for a breath. He opened them. He did not weep. He did not raise his sword. He spoke like a statesman who has seen too many funerals. Consent shaped is not consent. Harmony designed is not freedom. There is a line between guidance and devouring. You are crossing it. The throne brightened, not as a threat, as a lesson. The light pressed down on us. It tried to slide past my null and fill the room with peace. Peace felt like heavy cloth. Peace smelled like rain on iron. Peace tasted like sleep. The attendants who still lived smiled. Some stood straighter. Some knelt and stayed kneeling with relief. They were so very tired, the ring made their weariness holy. Outside the palace, riots broke out and then stopped. Arbeit's lines held without batons. Preachers spoke of union and their voices did not tremble. Crime dipped. The hives hummed. The orphans in the Schola slept without dreams and did not scream. In the Webway, the Guardians felt a new lock click into place. On Mars, 1,000 Forge worlds sent simultaneous signals. Each asked the same question without daring to phrase it. If the Emperor becomes a machine of order, whose prayers will the machine answer? The second metamorphosis arrived at dusk, a dusk that meant little inside the palace. Yet we felt it anyway. The throne's cables uncoiled a fraction, then lay back as if breathing out. The body upon the throne straightened by a finger's width, the head lifted by a hair. The ring flashed once in a language I could not entirely mute. I felt an intention pass through it like a bead along a string. The intention was this: expand. Across the Sol system, ancient pylons woke. Some were Necron and had been broken and studied and misunderstood. Some were human and built in the Dark Age by hands that no longer exist. Some were things Cawl had made with stolen ideas. All turned toward Terra as if toward a sun. Lines of quiet power linked them. The air between Luna and Earth grew still. The warps slid around that stillness like water around oil. The choirs tried to sing again. Their voices came out as one voice, not a chorus, a single tone. It carried meaning like a spear. It told every ship in range where to go and how fast to blink. There was no room for misinterpretation. Navigators found their sight narrowed to a tunnel. Ships moved with perfect efficiency. They arrived on exact schedules. Losses to misjump fell to near zero. The Imperium cheered. The Mechanicus stared. The Aeldari frowned and named it a prison with clean floors. Guilliman asked for counsel. He called for the High Lords and found their seats empty. Some had already gone to the throne as offerings. Some had been dismissed by soft orders that felt like relief. The Captain General did not sit. He stood beside his blade and watched a son argue with a father he might have to kill. I felt the third draw reach for me again. It was gentle. It was patient. It promised to fill the hole in my nature with purpose. I almost stepped forward. I almost laid my head on the golden plate. I almost said yes with my silence. Then I remembered why we were born barren of soul. We were made to stand in front of gods and say no. I kept my feet under me. I kept my jaw clenched. I kept my eyes on the ring. In the deep places, something moved that hated both chaos and control. The Tyranids felt the change and shifted course. They do not think as we think. They test. They taste. They flow toward food. The new law tasted like quiet. Quiet is not food. They turned their feeder fleets toward louder worlds. That spared some. It doomed others. Necrons stirred in cold tombs. Some awoke and smiled without lips. They respect order. They hate gods that demand worship. They measured the new light and found it acceptable only if it could be switched off. Silent kings considered silent bargains. By the seventh day, Terra slept better than it had in centuries. It also died in small numbers at the foot of a throne that no longer needed priests to shovel souls into its mouth. It fed itself, it chose, it drank the loyal, it made the deaths neat. Guilliman returned each day. He spoke reason, he begged mercy, he offered strategies, he warned of lines and laws. The Emperor listened and did not change. The ring listened and did not blink. The Captain General placed more sisters in the hall. One of us failed. She stepped forward and offered herself. She smiled with relief. She became light. I did not move. The Captain General looked at me and gave a nod that felt like a blade being weighed. On the 9th day, the Primarch asked for a final audience before he called the other sons. He chose words like a surgeon chooses knives. He said there was a choice before us that could not be delayed. He said he would not call it heresy to stop a god who had become a devourer. He said he would not call it loyalty to let love blind judgment. He said he needed an answer before he summoned Sanguinius's ghosts in the minds of men and lion lords, with broken crowns and wolves who hate leashes. The light of the throne held steady. The answer did not come as words. It came as a decree written into the Astronomican itself. The beam changed pitch. Every mind in range felt the same thought. Obey and be won. Disobey and be corrected. Resist and be remade. I looked at Guilliman's face. I saw the point where a sun ends and a regent begins. I knew the next words would summon a war that would make every other fight look small. I knew the ring was ready. I knew the throne was listening. I kept my silence and waited for the blade to fall. I did not blink. The hall was gold and quiet. The throne burned without mercy. Guilliman lifted his chin. He said one word. No. The word did not echo. The throne absorbed sound like a tomb absorbs light. Yet I felt the refusal move through the air like a blade. The Captain General shifted a fraction. His stance became decision. Custodians braced. Inquisitors held their breath. Tech priests mapped 1,000 outcomes and found none clean. The light from the Astronomican tilted. It leaned toward force. The ring on the Emperor's finger brightened like a new coin in a dead man's hand. It answered without words. Disobedience is error. Error must be corrected. Guilliman did not draw the Emperor's sword that hangs in memory. He laid his gauntlet on the gold rail. He spoke like a son who had carried empires on sore shoulders. Father, I will not let you devour humanity to save it. I will not let you end freedom to end fear. I will stand against this will. I will stand against you if I must. The Captain General nodded. He looked at me. I understood. I was the knife that cuts gods. Not by force, by vacancy. He signaled to the forge bridge. Cawl stepped into view like a cathedral in many parts. He carried a case of black metal without trim or praise. Blackstone, Necron make, human sin. He set it down. He opened it. Inside was a blade like a shard of night. No edge, no reflection. It drank the hall. Cawl spoke with one mouth only. It is not a sword. It is a silence shaped like a sword. It will drink the will that flows through a conduit. The ring is a conduit. The hand is a conduit. The throne is a conduit. Cut 1. The law shakes. The Inquisitors hissed between teeth. Tech priests made Binharic prayers that sounded like insects dying. The Captain General did not move his eyes from mine. He did not need to speak. The order was my life's purpose. Take the silence. Put it where it must go. End this. I took the blade. It bit my glove with cold. It tried to drink my void and found it tasteless. It settled like an animal on a rock. It liked me because I was nothing. We walked together toward the steps. The throne brightened. The attendants smiled like children seeing snow. The ring did not rage. It focused. The light compressed into lines. It tried to bend the path under my feet. My null slid through that intention. The beam could not find purchase in me. It reached for my humanity again. It offered rest. It offered belonging. It promised to fill the hole. I kept walking. Guilliman moved with me. The Captain General moved with him. Custodians closed in a golden crescent. Inquisitors faded to the edges like smoke that does not want to admit fear. Cawl whispered power levels to himself and held a smaller case. I could feel the Blackstone pylons beyond Terra turn their faces toward us. They tasted new geometry. They approved. A roar came through the webway like a storm trapped in a pipe. Eldari runes flickered in unseen corners. Eldrad had sent something that was not a message. It was a pause. A hitch in fate. He was buying us one heartbeat. I used it. I mounted the last step. I stood within the blaze. The Emperor's eyes were slits of math. The ring shone as if it had invented gold. His withered hand rested on the arm of the throne. The other lifted. Not in attack. In instruction. Stop. I did not stop. The ring turned and looked at me with its one will. It could not understand a soul that was a whole. It tried a new path. It reached through memory. It showed me the day I was taken as a child. It showed me the monastery where my name was removed. It showed me the friendship I never formed. It offered them back if I would kneel. The pictures were clean. The promise was exact. It would shape consent. It would name the shape love. I raised the silence blade. My arm felt heavy because the world likes to keep its laws and we were about to change one. The ring tensed. The throne braced. The palace of 10,000 years leaned against a pressure that had never existed before. We hung there. If you held this power for 1 second and you could choose, what would you do? Loyalty, heresy, or the narrow road between? Tell me in the comments. I will be reading every word. Guilliman spoke a last time. Forgive me. Then he drove his gauntlet under my elbow and gave the smallest push. It was not force. It was consent. It was a son saying yes to the only path left. I brought the blade down, not at the heart, not at the head, at the finger Blackstone met ring. The hall rang without sound. The blade drank the light. The ring burned. It clamped harder. It tried to slide beneath the cut and make the cut part of itself. It had done this before in older ages when lesser hands tried to take it. It would not be taken. It would own the taking. My null made its own law. No purchase, no echo. No shape for domination to grip. The silence felt like clean frost. The blade bit through gold. The finger came away. The Emperor flinched. It was the first true motion in a very long time. The ring fell. It struck the plate. It tried to bounce back onto divine bone. The Captain General moved faster than any story can measure. His boot came down. Blackstone greaves met old gold. The ring twitched like a living wire. It hissed in a voice that was not sound. No. Cawl opened his smaller case. Inside lay a cuff grown from carved Blackstone woven with human craft. He did not reach for the ring. He reached for me. He snapped the cuff around my wrist. He nodded once. Bear it, I understood. The ring would try to return to the strongest will. It needed a bearer to bridge its next domination. It would choose any hand if it could not take his. It would try to climb back up the throne like a serpent of idea. A null could be a bridge made of vacuum. It could also be a pit. I knelt. I picked up the ring with my cuffed hand. The Blackstone drank its first scream. I felt the weight of empires land on my bones. I felt a plan that had seduced kings press against my skin like 1,000 fingers. It was not the warp. It was intent purified to a weapon. It told me that all pain could end under one mind. It told me that noise was sin. It told me that freedom was a design flaw. I slid it toward my finger. The hall lurched. Guilliman took a step. The Captain General took another. Cawl lifted 3 hands to 3 seals. The ring begged in a way that did not sound like begging. It promised to leave love intact. It promised to remove only fear. It promised to spare children. It promised to keep me whole. It was very good at promises. I put the ring on. It did not vanish me. It found no true soul to hide inside. It hit the hollow where my presence should be and spun. It tried to own the absence. It could not. The cuff drank. The blade in my other hand drank. The pylons drank through geometry I could not name. The ring thrashed against a void that would not define itself. It needed definition to command. It could not command a whole. The throne shook like a ship leaving a long harbour. The Astronomican flared and flickered. Across the Imperium, navigators cried out and then saw a new kind of line. The Chaos gods screamed in many colours and bit each other in frustration. They could not touch the place where the ring and the null fought. There was nothing to grip. There was nothing to corrupt. There was only subtraction. The Emperor sagged. The gold burned lower. His withered face lost a layer of light. For a heartbeat, I saw a father who was only a man sitting under the weight of a plan that had taken 10,000 years and every mistake a species can make. His eyes opened a little wider. They found Guilliman. They found the Captain General. They found me. There was a message without words. Thank you and forgive me and hold fast. The ring changed tactics. It stopped promising. It started counting. One species, one mind, one peace. It used numbers as shackles. It used perfection as a grid. It tried to settle over me like a net made of smooth equations. I do not have a mind that lights the warp. I have a hole. The net found no pegs. It fell through me and tangled around itself. Cawl shouted a cluster of syllables that tried to be calm and failed. Now. Blackstone pylons around Terra woke fully. Lines of quiet linked from Luna to the palace. The cuff brightened in darkness. The silence blade hummed like a hymn with no words. The Captain General pressed his boot harder. Guilliman took my shoulder in an iron hand. Eldrad's stolen heartbeat stretched. I pulled the ring off my finger. It fought. It slid. The cuff drank. The blade drank. I held it pinched between null and night. I lifted it to the air over the throne. I spoke the only words I had spoken in years. Be empty. The ring cracked. The sound was like a lie breaking in a quiet room. No thunder, no chorus. The crack ran along a line that had waited since another world where fire lives under mountains. It could not shatter there without that mountain. It could crack here if void and Blackstone made the space where mountains live. Light bled out as thin threads. They tried to find purpose. They tried to weave a new will. The pylons drank the threads into the geometry around Terra. The Astronomican flickered, then steadied at a lower pitch. The Webway shuddered and then accepted a new lock. The Chaos gods howled like beasts denied a meal. The ring circle held a moment longer like a smile on a face that has lost the joke. Then it split in two. I felt something die. I felt something wake. The throne's pain returned in full. The attendants gasped, as if their lungs had been under a gentle hand that now lifted. Souls stopped flowing from their bodies without leave. The black ships began to turn again. Somewhere, a million cages reopened to a terror we had thought gone. Mercy and necessity traded places again. The Emperor sagged again. The light from his sockets narrowed. He spoke for the last time in that new law's voice, and then in his own. In both, the words were these. Hold fast, keep them alive. Do not let me become a god again. The Captain General bowed his head once. Guilliman did not weep. Cawl took the broken halves with rituals of theft and prayer. He placed them into a prison of Blackstone and oath. He said he would take them where even his curiosity would fear to look. I believed him and did not. I fell to one knee. The cuff had eaten too much idea. My bones hummed with numbers that would never mean anything now. The silence blade cooled. It wanted to sleep in a dark shelf forever. I wanted the same. The Captain General's hand on my shoulder was a mountain. I stood because he required it. The palace breathed. It sounded like masonry remembering storm. Inquisitors stepped from shadow with warrants in their eyes and found no one willing to receive them. Tech priests updated a million logs and found no category. Custodians shifted to new posts with no training because duty writes its own drills. The Aeldari heartbeat that had stretched snapped back. Somewhere far, Eldrad exhaled and changed a plan that had been old when our species was young. Chaos did not celebrate. It recalculated. A leash had been cut. So had a path. The food would flow again, but the flavor had changed. A taste of order remained in the lattice. It would make their wars stranger. It would make their victories smaller. It would make their rage hotter. Abaddon stared up at a knight that had refused him twice. He promised a 13th promise, which is to say a first Necrons measured. Some smiled. Some frowned. The Silent King listened to reports of a human null who had worn a god that was not a god and not broken. He made a note in a ledger of outcomes that might need pruning. He let the page stay open. On Terra, a son made a choice. Guilliman stood at the foot of the throne. He spoke to the captains of 10,000 chapters through vox and oath and rumour. He told them the truth. The Emperor had been taken by a will that promised unity without consent. It had been stopped. The cost would return. The tithe would begin anew. The black ships would sail. The choir pits would sing and die. He did not blame the dying. He did not bless the cost. He did not call it holy. He called it necessary until another path is cut. He also gave a decree. The halves of the ring would be sealed where Blackstone sleeps in unlit vaults. No Primarch would touch them. No Mechanicus would measure them without a sister standing in the room and a custodian ready to end the room. No Inquisitor would own them. No Saint would wear them. If any tried, the penalty would be the last penalty. Treason against species is the oldest crime. The Captain General accepted. Cawl bowed with 3 heads and gritted 15 teeth. Inquisitors considered and calculated and nodded, because there was no air in the hall for a different answer. I said nothing. It is what I am for. Days passed. The Astronomican held. Dimmer, narrower, more honest. Ships travelled. Slower, safer, more lost. The black ships returned to work. The screaming began again in places where walls meet chains. I stood outside those walls. I watched the cycle reclaim its place. I saw the small mercies return with the small horrors. A priest wept because he could not promise unity without cost. He promised duty instead. It tasted like iron. The metamorphosis of the Imperium did not vanish. It left scarring. Machine spirits hummed a little more in tune. Arbite's lines used batons less for a time. Hives slept better for a month. Then hunger returned because hunger always keeps the books. The throne burned with no new mercy and no new cruelty. It was what it had been. A wound that lights a galaxy, a bargain that never stops asking for more. I went back to my post. I kept my silence. The cuff stayed on my wrist. Cawl asked to remove it. The Captain General said not yet. Eldrad sent nothing, and that was something. The Blackstone blade went into a vault where it could dream of never being used again. It slept badly. Sometimes, when the palace is very quiet, I hear a thin sound in the geometry. It is not the warp. It is not the ring. It is the memory of a promise that almost took us. It waits at the edge of thought like a shore we will never land on. It reminds me that law can be a weapon sharper than any knife. It reminds me that mercy without choice becomes theft. It reminds me why I am nothing and why nothing matters. I served in the shadow of the golden throne. I still do. I saw a god try to make us safe by ending what we are. I helped end the god. I would do it again. I do not want to. That is why I can. When the last lights go low in the hall, I look at the hand that wears a cuff of night. I think of the finger that fell. I think of the son who said no. I think of the father who thanked him. I think of the price we paid to return to pain. I think of the price we refused to pay for a perfect silence. War continues. Chaos snarls. Xeno's scheme. The Imperium limps and fights and prays and eats itself and feeds its children and eats them too. We are what we have been. We are what we can bear. Someday, perhaps, another path will be cut through this maze that is both shrine and prison. It will not be cut by a ring. Until then, the throne burns. I stand at its foot. My name is Silence. My story is a warning. My warning is simple. Beware the peace that tastes like sleep. Beware the unity that needs your consent refined for you. Beware the God who speaks like an answer, and hold fast.